Good afternoon, webinar attendees. Thank you for attending Gyro and Loyalty Research Center's webinar, CMO Imperatives, Sales and Marketing Unite to Drive Sales Results. My name is Mike Agnello. I work on the business development team here at Gyro, and I'll be your MC for today. For those of you who aren't familiar with Gyro, we're a global ideas shop with a specialized focus in business-to-business marketing. We have offices around the planet, and our industry has named us Agency of the Year a total of 29 times. Most recently, we were named the 2015 Agency of the Year by the Business Marketing Association. Some of our clients include BlackBerry, Cars.com, eBay, SAP, Tate & Lyle, TD Ameritrade, and Time. Loyalty Research Center specializes in customer relationship measurement and management. They work with businesses from Fortune 500 companies to mid-sized companies to understand customer relationships. Using proprietary analytics to work across a variety of data streams, they help clients identify options for effectively generating powerful changes in customer behavior. Please know that this webinar is interactive and you'll be invited to vote in a poll today. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A or chat panel shown here. Now, this webinar is jam-packed with some great information, so if you miss anything, do not worry. We'll send you access to a recording and a PDF of the presentation in the next few days. One lucky participant will be receiving a complimentary marketing workshop from the Gyro team. To be eligible, simply fill out the short survey at the end of this webinar. Your speakers today are Carolyn Ladd, VP of Account Planning at Gyro, and Aldy Keene, President and CEO of Loyalty Research Center. In today's webinar, we're going to cover 2 strategies to drive leads and enable sales, how to drive sales growth with existing customers using analytics, and using content marketing and marketing automation to drive leads. With that, I'll hand it over to Carolyn.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. It would be absolutely amazing if sales and marketing could unite in businesses across the country, across the world. In a recent Forrester report, they found that companies that work together, sales and marketing organizations that work together, were able to increase sales leads by 50 to 80%. In addition, if you look at where customers come from today and how long the sales process can often be, particularly in the B2B space, and how much of that sale actually takes place before even contact with a salesperson, it becomes perhaps even more imperative for sales and marketing to be involved and coordinated. As you can see by this chart, up to 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the times, marketing people are providing potential buyers with information and content. And then by the time a salesperson is involved in the process, when the RFP is sent or the first phone call takes place, the expectation by buyers is for the salesperson to be even more knowledgeable than they would be in the past. Because much of that information that would have been provided by the salesperson about the basic product or service is actually being found and discovered in that process before sales is contacted. And so once again, really having that understanding of what information marketing is providing and what sales needs to be able to accommodate once they are involved becomes a critical part of sales success. And then finally, when you do get your customers and they are part of the organization, keeping them is often a huge challenge and a place where sometimes marketing is not as involved as perhaps sales is. But one of the pieces of information that has come out of some research is that just a 5% increase in customer loyalty can actually lead to a 25% to 85% increase in profitability. And so what we're going to talk to you about today, Aldy's going to share with you a case with a customer that his organization has worked with in terms of how do you actually do an assessment of the current customer base and really understand the ins and outs of those customers and what kind of profitability and contribution they're making to the bottom line, and how do you help salespeople work better with those customers to keep them. So you're going to get some insight into that part of the sales process and sales and marketing coordinating. And then I'm going to share with you a story with a customer of ours who put together a content marketing program combined with marketing automation, and we're able to actually increase the number of sales qualified leads exponentially. So hopefully the combination of those 2 stories combined with research will inspire you to unite and find ways for sales and marketing to work together. So here's Aldy.
Thanks, Carolyn. We're going to start this module with a survey. Before you should see a question: how important is revenue or profit growth in the mandate for marketing in your organization? So let's use that to get a perspective of where the audience is right now. Four answers. First, single most important thing, it's a standout thing. Other objectives, but certainly sales growth is tops. B, one of the top three. C, well, we understand it's important, but it's not really articulated as one of our objectives. And finally, not a direct concern of marketing. We have other concerns like content build, page views, other things are key metrics. Michael, where do we stand here in terms of results? About 50-50 between A and B. And if we go on to the next slide, marketing a growth engine, we see that over 90% of CMOs are currently mandated with driving some form of sales growth in their organizations. So linking sales and marketing together is more critical than ever, as Carolyn pointed out a few minutes ago. The top B2B CMOs tend to look at marketing analytics, lead gen, and sales enablement. Marketing analytics. Now, looking at these multiple data streams to try to milk more information out that we can use. McKinsey recently did a study of one sector and found that those organizations in that sector that utilized powerful analytics were able to get a 60% higher operating margin. Now, we found similar things in some of the work and some of the clients that we've seen. Lead gen, get in front of the right prospects. Sales enablement, produce compelling stories to make something happen when you're in front of that prospect. Marketing analytics and customer fit. Well, marketing analytics is really a strong contributor to lead gen and sales enablement. So analytics, the intent is put the salesperson in front of the right prospect. Analytics, tailoring stories specifically to that prospect or that segment. In a few minutes, Carolyn's going to talk about generating target, needs, and content along those lines. Customer fit and growth, so how do we achieve net growth? How does that work with customer fit? Well, net revenue growth is really the sum of two things. It's growth minus shrinkage. We see revenue growth coming from new customers and also growing existing customers. But you've got to take into account the revenue that's lost from customers that have completely or partially defected. So this really needs to look at what part of your customer portfolio is really growing and thriving, what part is really shrinking. If we can even reduce the shrinkage, the loss, we're achieving net revenue growth. So we're going to go through that today with a case study. Someone that we've worked with for over 7 years. Let me give you a little background before we launch into the specifics. It's a B2B company. They're based in North America. They have 250,000 business customers spread across that geography. It's serviced by 100 plus branches, and there's a lot of transactions, 2 to 3 times a week at those customer locations. There are 6 to 8 competitors that have a similar footprint, North America. They have different business models. They appeal to different segments. And then there are a lot of local and regional competitors that tend to focus more specifically on the customers in their area and their particular needs. Now, this industry is starting to recover, and the marketing function has really been given a strong imperative to grow. It's a customer-centric organization to begin with, so this growth imperative really is focused and centered in marketing. What are some of the issues? Well, as I was alluding to in that net customer growth, one of the big things in this industry is turnover. The industry average is 14% lost customers per year. This is on a customer basis, not a dollar basis. 14% of customers, each firm loses 14% a year. Our client, 9% a year. A little bit better. But translate that out. I said 250,000 customers. 9% translates into 22,500 customers lost per year. So you're going to your sales team and saying, you're starting 22,500 customers behind in terms of trying to grow this year. That's a big hurdle to overcome. On the right side, we see problems are really endemic to this organization and to the industry. 80% of the customers in the industry are likely to experience a significant problem in the course of a year. 80%. That's down from 90% about 12 years ago. So it's improved, but it's still horrific. You're extremely likely to have a problem that really affects your business. And naturally, as you'd expect me to say, turnover and those problems are strongly linked. Let's put this in perspective a little bit before pursuing the case a little deeper. We've looked at thousands of B2B programs over the past 20 years. Our findings are, one, 21% of respondents, 21% of businesses tend to have at least one significant problem during the last 6 months. More important, only half of those have been successfully resolved. Now that's a ton of frustrated, unhappy customers wandering around. Think about your own business. It says that a fifth, 20% of your customers have experienced a significant problem, and only half of them have been resolved. That means that 10% of your customer base is probably somewhere between unhappy and extremely frustrated right now. What a finding. And it really has an impact on the relationship. Look at this infographic. We've segmented customers. These are our benchmarks. Segmented customers into the strength of the relationship varying from loyal to vulnerable. Look at the very top of it. On average, 30% tend to be loyal, 50% neutral, 20% vulnerable. And look at how that relates to problems. The loyals, only about 6% have experienced a significant problem. That ranges up to 70% for the vulnerables. Coming down one row, in terms of resolution, most of the loyals have their problems successfully resolved, whereas very few of the vulnerables. Now, what's the impact on dollars? If you look at the income flow from each of those segments, these are our averages. Roughly 65% of the asset value of the customer base comes from that 30% of loyal customers, the strong relationship customers. Only 5% comes from the 20% vulnerable. Most of your asset value comes from the loyal customer base. So that's really critical. You need to look at that and say, why do we have such a strong base of customers among the 30 and so weak in the 20? Why do those weak ones exist? Well, most customers tend to look at themselves. Most of our clients tend to look and say, it's got to be something we're doing, something we've put in place, an experience we've created, a person we've hired. I call this the Wayne's World syndrome. You know, we're not worthy, it's all us. Actually, when you look at most customer bases in more depth, you'll find that the customer has some role in that. So let's look at the customers, going back to my case study, the customers that quit. I want to start with the yellow slice of the pie, 45%. So the first finding is 45% of these quits can be attributed to a product, service, or billing issue, a problem. Further, 30% of those could be fixed, 15% could not be fixed. Let's break that down a little bit more. What it says is 30% were really wanting something that we could provide. We just didn't. It was an execution issue. The other 15% wanted something that we could not provide. They wanted something outside the design of our business model. Moving down, 30% said it was a price issue. A competitor offered a better price, so we quit. I'm not loyal to anybody. Everybody offers the same thing. No one stands out. It's just price. You can always generate behavioral change with these customers. Just cut price. Most of us don't want customers in that category. Moving up, 18% said we moved our business in-house. Now, that's another way of saying you can't provide the benefit streams that we need. In fact, in this industry, it's saying no one in the industry can do that. And finally, 7% were uncontrollable. Now, I take this and say, as this firm did, 15% in the yellow slice could not be fixed, 18% wanted the service but could find no one to really deliver it. That's 33% of quits that were bad fit customers. They wanted something that either this firm or the entire industry couldn't provide. They wanted something different. That's a critical finding. These bad fit customers are better served by other firms or insourcing. They're a real threat to your business. You invest a lot of money in customers like that. Sales time, retention time. We dealt with one firm in looking at these bad fit customers, and we said, what's the strategy? And the management team huddled, and they came back and said, lots of hugs, lots of love. We can't change our business model, but let's give them lots of love. That lots of love generated losses for that segment of the business because of all the time and money spent trying to keep them happy. They really couldn't change them. They couldn't make them more satisfied with the service. They could just spend a lot of time with them. That's a danger. This firm looked at these customers very carefully and said of that 45% that had problems and the 2/3 of those, the 30% that had issues we could resolve, let's focus on them. Let's focus on customers that are a good fit for us, not a bad fit. Let's listen to them and focus on their problems and issues and address them. They came down to a very limited number of product issues and service issues. By doing that, they reduced their quits to 6% over a 12-month period. If you remember the math going back to the beginning, that reduced the quits from 22,500 to 15,000. It reduced the number of new accounts the sales team had to sell by 7,500. That's less of a hurdle. It actually helped address and contribute to net growth. So if you can identify who to try to change and work on them instead of trying to listen to the cacophony of voices coming in, you'll do so much better. Next steps. Well, they identified who these high probability quit customers based on nature of transaction, their verticals, the types of products they had, and other information. That could be projected out. And from that you could identify who's really the good fit customers versus the bad. They were then able to intervene with these customers and save a lot of these quit customers that were good fit customers. That's point number one. That's what I was just talking about. They reduced it to 6%. Further, you can use that, the bad fit customers, to help identify who the good fit customers are. And they actually use that to help prospect more effectively. You know, it's funny defining yourself by who you're not or who you don't want to be. So these good fit customer definitions were used to effectively avoid those customers in current selling. And finally, just as by looking at the negatives, they also looked at the positives. Let's look at the loyal customers, those that spend a lot of money, and look at the top loyal customers, the strong customers, what they buy, and the range of that. Why do some buy all of these and others don't? How can we extract more from our existing customer base by trying to focus on selling more to the underperforming strong relationship customers. They're now really driving that through their sales team as well. My final point is, you generate this great analysis about probability of quit across the entire customer base, good prospecting, and what a good prospect looks like, opportunities within our customer base to sell more effectively. How do you get it out there? One of the breakthroughs they made was what we call information logistics. They put this together in a database and tailored an app which is now pushed out to tablets for their salespeople and service people. So this information exists on a customer by customer basis, and it's dynamic. So as they're going out and making calls for the day, they can see the issues that exist with those customers and the opportunities. So it's a great use of technology to really help make their organization more effective and achieve sales growth. Now, Carolyn's going to take over and talk about her case study and really how to tell the story more effectively and push that out to customers and prospects. Carolyn?
Great, thank you. So as you can see, when you start looking at understanding your existing customer base, that knowledge can actually loop around and make you smarter from getting sales on the front end. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can work the sales cycle, often when marketing is more in the lead seat, and how do you better coordinate with sales to make sure that sales qualified leads will actually be something that we can all celebrate in the organization. The company that I'm going to talk about today is a company called Forte. They're in the marketing warehouse and automation space. They sell to very, very large companies like your Amazons and Macy's and anybody who has huge database operations. They do the design work. They can help you implement as well as putting the software in place to keep it running. Like all B2B organizations, their goal for the year was to grow leads, and especially those sales qualified leads. I mean, what sales organization, what company doesn't want marketing to create more leads these days? And like so many B2B organizations, the sales cycle can be fairly long. 4 to 6 months is common, well over a year is equally common in many instances. And then once you become a customer, it can take a long time, over a year or multiple years, before you're ready to be sold to again or need something else. So the importance of having some type of an automation program, a way to touch customers on an ongoing basis, becomes a critical component. And you can see how the long-term customer relationship dovetails into what Aldy was just talking about. One of the things that I found interesting about Forte, and the reason I decided to share this particular case with you, is that in the marketplace today, there's just tons and tons of information out there about growing a content program and marketing automation. And for many people, we're all on board and all running around trying to create content and trying to implement systems, but sometimes it just feels like we're on a hill that's almost impossible to climb due to expense and time. And I think what Forte did is they did it in small bites and small steps and made it achievable. And that was one of the pieces that I thought you might find interesting. So in terms of the overall process, regardless of what size program you might be putting in place, you have to plan it, you have to build it, you have to run it, and then you have to look at it, respond and improve over time. The first step in the process is knowing customers. I think as marketers, we often do that part pretty well. Trying to interview some customers, get some insights, really understand what's important to them. Putting together personas can all be part of getting to know your customer. Another piece that we're very big advocates of at Gyro is how then do you take that information and take what customers are doing, and how do you map that across the buyer journey? Because not every buyer is involved at every step in the process, and understanding where those different buyers come into the process, what they're interested in understanding at those various touch points, can also help to inform the type of content you need to put into play, and also can help to inform what channels you need to be using. Once you have a basic understanding of your customers and have that definition in place, then you can start looking at content and what kind of content you need to develop. And in our minds, you want to do that as thoughtfully as you do everything else. So one of the pieces that you begin to put together once you understand your audience is putting together a content map and looking at what are going to be the key hooks for the audience, what are going to be the primary conversations, what are they talking about, how do we put it in their words. And in this particular content map I'm showing you, you can see there were 2 primary conversations we were going to focus on. And then you can see the conversation starters are sort of the hot words, as I like to sort of think of them, or hot concepts that we want to make sure that we're going to be touching on as we develop this content. You might develop one map, you might develop multiple maps, depending on how many industries, target audiences, etc. Once you have your content maps in place and you know what you want to be talking about because you've identified the content, then you can start saying to yourself, so where are we going to get this content from? And there are really 3 primary places you can gather content. Amplification is where you take somebody else's content, maybe Forrester Research or Gartner or the Industry Week folks, and you purchase their content or you get access to it through some partnership, and you're able to offer it to customers, to potential customers, as information that they might be able to use to help them make decisions. Another possibility is looking at, do you do some curation of content? That's where you sort of, there are tools out there that can help you pull that content out from all the different content resources. Then what you can do is you can add your own editorial comments and point of view around that. Presenting that information through blog posts can be an effective way. So you're basically piggybacking on what somebody else is writing and adding your spin or your expertise. And then the last area of content is to create it yourself. And in this particular case, that's what Forte decided to do. They decided because so much of their business is based on their consulting expertise, they felt it was critical for them to be able to write the content and be able to be a leader in that regard. Other customers we work with will mix and match different parts and pieces of those. But all to say is you don't have to do all of it, you can do a piece of it. Once you identify the content maps, once you identify whether you're going to write it, build it, buy it, you can start looking at, so what kind of content are we going to build? Usually you build a couple large pieces, in this case a webinar and a white paper. And then you start looking at how many different pieces can you slice and dice that content into. Because any large piece of content should be able to be turned into 5, 6, or sometimes more pieces of content. So you can sort of tease that out and get people's attention with different parts and pieces. It helps to continue the story that you're telling, and it also helps you get more ROI out of that initial content investment. And of course, then you also figure out what are the different channels you're going to be pushing that content through. So, sort of simultaneously to developing your content, you can also be setting up your marketing automation system. In this particular case, Marketo is the product that they use, although they did an evaluation and looked at a number of other products. So I don't know if it matters so much which tool you want to use, but at some point having a marketing automation platform can make your program even more successful than just trying to do it without. There are, again, 3 phases. You can step into marketing automation. Step 1 could be if you've never done much database work. How do you get your initial database in place and begin to build it? Once you have a core database in place, you can begin to get a little bit more sophisticated. You can start to do some segmentation, deploying different types of content or slightly modifying that content to personalize it a bit more. And then how do you get into a more automated program that triggers additional content and additional contacts with customers based on actions that they might take. In the case of Forte, they had been sort of keeping a database for a while, so they were able to do a little bit of the segmentation. And as we move into this year, they're looking more at how to do more actual automation. The other component as you're building your database is how do you decide what is a sales qualified lead versus a marketing qualified lead? Because I think as marketers, we've all been in that situation where you're like the proud parent who has all these great leads, and you turn them over to sales, and sales looks at them and says, none of those are useful. And we can't use any of those leads, and you're just like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And one of the ways you get over that hurdle is that you work with sales to identify, so what does a sales qualified lead look like? What kinds of actions do we need people to have taken? What kinds of questions do they need to be able to answer? And how do you build that into the purchase process and into the scoring that you're going to use in your marketing automation system? Finally, once you have your content in place, your system is set up, you're actually ready to push that content and the advertising of that content, promotion of that content out through your various channels. The top ones that we see used all the time are pay-per-click, some sort of a media buy, whether it be banner ads or print. Email is a critical piece, particularly because marketing automation programs are so well suited for that. Some type of inbound program that you might have in place, and then some sort of video program are what we see as most common. So here's some example. It's just a handful of content, excuse me, just a handful of content pieces. You can see that Forte did not try to create thousands of pieces of content. They did slice and dice these into some smaller pieces, but in terms of core pieces of content, they had a couple white papers, they had some blog posts, they had a landing page, and then they did some promotional pieces. All to say that you don't have to create hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of content to begin to get some mileage. And then lastly, you start looking at what are the results. So after year one, they saw an increase of 21% in terms of visits. They saw 3 times the click-through rate, and those are all great statistics, and as marketers, we always like those, but I know in our minds that's often not the brass ring that we're looking for. The brass ring starts to look at exactly what kinds of leads are we generating, and were we successful in creating, getting those sales qualified leads. And so you can see on this slide, we did generate over 3,000 leads in a space that actually is pretty small, so that was quite impressive. Our sales qualified leads, in terms of leads that the salespeople were thrilled to get, were over 1,000. And we also were able to cut that cost per lead from about $61 a lead to $22 a lead. So that was a huge, huge win for everyone in the company, for marketing, for sales, and ultimately for the bottom line of the organization. Another major win is that as part of what we were trying to do during this program is not only to generate leads that would become new sales, but also to elevate Forte in the minds of investors and potential buyers. And as part of this process, we were able to get the attention of Swisslog, who just purchased Forte this spring. And so now they are part of a much bigger organization because of looking like a major player in this space and being able to elevate themselves in the minds of buyers and a buyer who actually bought them. So hopefully what you've gotten out of this today, this webinar today, are 2 things. One is, there are some very smart things you can be doing with your existing customer base to understand who are your loyals, how do you make sure that you're targeting them appropriately, how do you make sure you're arming salespeople to get the most out of those individuals, and how do you not put your time and energy into those that are perhaps putting a drag on the organization, who are not a fit. And at the same time, you can be putting together a program that combines a content marketing program with sales automation, where you can actually improve your sales qualified leads, which turns into better revenue. And you get the whole circle of sales and marketing working together, and everyone's a success. So hopefully you can take some information back to your organizations, get your sales and marketing organizations working together, and have some of these same successes. I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Thank you, Carolyn and Aldy. Excellent job. We'd now like to open the floor up to any questions that you might have. And we've received a couple of great ones, so please keep submitting. Our first one is for Carolyn. How long did it take Forte to plan and then execute its program?
So the goal was to have something in market at the beginning of the year. This was last year. So we spent about 12 weeks total trying to put everything in place, getting all the planning in place, doing the interviews with the customers, and getting the content written. So the fact that we had a small amount of content that we were focused on is what made that doable. The other piece that helped to make that doable was that they had been looking at marketing automation tools, so they were not having to go through that process. They had pretty much already decided on which tool they were going to purchase. Thank you.
Next, we'll have Aldy answer this one. How can you use good fit information for market prospecting outside of the current customer base?
Thanks, Michael, and thanks for the question. We touched on this a little bit during my part of the webinar. Let's delve into it a little more deeply. So we've got a good fit definition. I think there's always a misunderstanding that will perfectly describe exactly among all of your prospects who we should be going after, and in reality it doesn't. You're limited by the descriptors you have in your database of existing customers and for your prospects. But by using analysis, you can typically get 40 to 60% of the way there. In addition, what you want to do is use some discriminatory questions, technical term, but just a couple of very good questions that came out of the analysis that really distinguishes the really good fit customers from those that are bad. Your sales team or prospecting team has to use those to really define who the great candidates are. When you do that, you're increasing your averages even more. And live with the fact that you're starting from 0 right now. You'll get 60% of the way the first year, 75% the second year, 85%, and it's an ongoing learning process. But that's how firms in B2B use that. Michael?
Thank you. And we have another great question for Carolyn. What if you really don't have any content to start with? What would your recommendation be as a way to get started with a content marketing program?
So I think one of the ways that we've seen the most successful is ultimately to find a third-party source who has some content that is already written and either purchase the rights to reuse that or partner with them in some manner. In this day and age, the fact that there's so much content out there and often it is already, some of it's already written, being able to leverage that content, which buys you a little bit of time to write your own content, or you can write a point of view around that content you've purchased, can be a great way to get started. So that's what we would generally recommend. At some point, you are going to want to put together your own content to create a point of view, but it is a good way to get out the door, especially if it's from a source that your target audience values. So, Michael.
Thank you. And we have a very interesting question for Aldy. What if a customer quits without reporting a problem?
Thanks, Michael. And first, let me say, problems are a great source of information about the fit of your customer. They're a great source of information about what's going on in your interactions with customers. So, first of all, B2B. Typically, the good thing is we know who our customer is. When they quit, we know who it is. Even in a lot of B2C cases. I think the first thing you need to do is try to find out why. If you can get to that customer in some way, shape, or form, find out why. What is it? Because that's an additional learning. But second, and this is absolutely vital, most firms, it's sort of like a prom date type thing. If you don't want to go out with me, I don't want to go out with you. Once a customer quits, they're purged from the files. Customers that have been lost can frequently be won back, and that's a tremendous ROI. You should continue communicating with and marketing to that customer. Win-back programs just have a tremendous ROI. And while we're at it, Michael, some other ROIs in terms of, or low-hanging fruit in terms of dealing with problems. Is not reporting a problem, you should absolutely ask your customers on an ongoing basis, have you had a problem? Do you have a problem now? Tell me about it. And if they say yes, and if you've tried to do something about it, have we resolved it? That's absolutely vital information for you in managing your customer base. Scary question to ask, valuable information.
Thank you. And we're going to give a few minutes back to your day, so we're just going to have one more question, and we'll give it to Carolyn. Do I really need a marketing automation system to be successful? If so, what marketing automation system would you recommend?
So I think the answer to that is probably you will. Most companies, especially as you get more sophisticated and as you build your database, you're going to want something that makes it more efficient. So a marketing automation system is going to be important. A lot of people start out using some sort of a database program or even something like Excel, which can sort of get you started on the cheap, but at some point that becomes a pretty inefficient route to manage your customers. So I would say yes, at some point you are going to want to make that investment. There are so many different choices out there. A lot of people are using Salesforce, a lot of people use Marketo, a lot of people use Eloqua, a lot of people use HubSpot. So there's, and there's yet more. So I think in terms of does one product outdo all the others, our opinion would be no. Our opinion would be you need to look at what kinds of tasks you're trying to achieve, what kind of sophisticated functionality or lack of sophisticated functionality do you need, and really look at the products that are out there and make an informed decision. So So yes, you probably do need marketing automation, maybe not out of the gate, and there's no one right solution. I think each company needs to look at what's going to be the best fit for them.
Great. And that concludes our webinar for today. Please make sure to fill out the survey at the end of this for your chance to win a complimentary marketing workshop from the Gyro team. And on behalf of all of us here at Gyro and LRC, I would just like to thank you for tuning into this webinar. Have a great day.